All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here with us because today we're doing something a little bit different. We are zeroing in on one single highly pivotal day, July 25th, 2026. We're going to unpack a massive 24 hours of global movement. I mean, we are talking about everything from shifting military strategies to some truly devastating climate anomalies. The events of this exact day serve as this incredibly powerful snapshot of exactly where our world stands right now. So let's get into it.
So I want you to think about something. What actually happens when global security, trade, and climate all clash on the exact same day? Because usually, we think of these issues in total isolation. We read a headline about global trade, and then, completely separately, we'll read an article about a climate disaster. But July 25th, it gives us this really unique lens that shows us just how deeply interconnected these supposedly isolated events truly are. By breaking down the data and the raw events of this one day, we can really start to see the bigger picture. To make sense of it all, we've broken today's agenda down into 5 key themes. Number 1, Middle East security flashpoints. 2, Eurasian conflict and diplomacy. 3, Indo-Pacific clashes and trade. 4, global political upheaval. And 5, extreme weather and tragedies. Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, Middle East security flashpoints, where we're looking at some rapidly evolving conflicts across the region. Look at this incredible contrast happening literally in real time. On one hand, you have the United States suspending its overnight bombardment of Iranian targets for the very first time in 2 weeks. White House officials halted those strikes specifically to eye a potential window for renewed diplomatic negotiations. But then, at the exact same time, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC Navy, is actively continuing its blockade of international shipping lanes. They actually reported the interception of 4 commercial vessels that were trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz. It is wild to see potential diplomacy sitting directly alongside continued kinetic action in the very same region. And those regional threats, they're only widening. First, Yemen's Houthi forces launched ballistic missiles targeting Saudi Aramco refining facilities in Jizan and Yanbu. This is absolutely critical because it pushes Middle East energy threats well beyond the Persian Gulf and right into the Red Sea. Meanwhile, in a totally separate development on the same day, an Israeli airstrike in the North Gaza Governorate killed Brigadier General Abdel Nasser al-Makama, who is the head of the Hamas police force. Moving on to Section 2, Eurasian conflict and diplomacy. We've got some really surprising diplomatic pushback and deadly cross-border strikes to cover here. This next point brilliantly illustrates how diplomacy can happen in the most unexpected forums. Quote, end the war in Ukraine. Now, this wasn't said behind closed doors, and it wasn't said by a Western leader. This was a stunning moment where Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, in a rare face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin, publicly challenged the Russian leader. He directly urged him to freeze or end the conflict. That is a massive diplomatic pivot from a nation that is traditionally squarely in Russia's sphere of influence. But, despite those high-level calls for peace, the ground reality remains just absolutely devastating. On this single day, Ukrainian strikes on Russian-occupied Zaporizhia resulted in 11 deaths, while concurrent Russian drone attacks on Ukraine's Sumy region killed 3 people. It's just a stark, heavy reminder of the human cost that continues to mount every single day, even while these high-level diplomatic meetings are taking place. All right, Section 3 takes us to Indo-Pacific clashes and trade. We're talking high-stakes maritime tensions and some sweeping new economic tariffs. 23 feet, or about 7 meters. I really want you to visualize that distance for a second. It's roughly the length of a large pickup truck. That is exactly how close a massive Chinese vessel maneuvered to a Philippine ship, the BRP Datu Padohinog. Out at sea, closing the distance to just 23 feet is extraordinarily dangerous. It literally leaves zero margin for error. And the physical confrontation actually escalated from there. The China Coast Guard fired water cannons at that Philippine vessel while it was on a resupply mission near the Scarborough Shoal. It paints a really intense picture of the physical reality of the clashes happening right now in the South China Sea. So here is where we see trade intertwining with these geopolitical alliances. While the Philippines is facing all of this maritime pressure from China, they're also getting hit by sweeping U.S. economic moves. The the U.S. Trade Representative just began enforcing new tariffs ranging from 10% to 12.5% on imports from 60 different countries. They cited failures to address forced labor and global supply chains. And interestingly enough, the Philippines is actually one of the nations included in these new penalizing tariffs. It really goes to show how complex and, frankly, multi-directional international relations truly are. Which brings us to Section 4, Global Political Upheaval. We're looking at resignations, military shifts, and outright diplomatic rejections.
Let's look at two domestic events that highlight global political fragility right now. Over in India, Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan stepped down. This happened after weeks of mass student and opposition protests over standardized test leaks and educational scandals. It's a huge domestic shakeup. Then, jumping over to South America, Brazilian officials preemptively denied entry visas to 2 U.S. State Department delegates. Why? Well, they explicitly cited concerns over potential domestic political interference ahead of their upcoming elections. So you have two completely different continents, but both events highlight governments dealing with intense internal pressure and taking pretty drastic actions to maintain control. Meanwhile, in Sudan, political upheaval takes the form of kinetic territorial conflict. The Sudanese armed forces, fighting alongside allied Darfur forces, recaptured the North Kordofan town of Sayala from the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. This military breakthrough resulted in the deaths of 38 RSF fighters, marking a really significant and deadly shift in territorial control on this specific day.
Finally, Section 5, Extreme Weather and Tragedies. We're looking at disasters and localized incidents claiming lives all over the globe. It's genuinely heartbreaking when you zoom out and look at the human toll across the globe on this single day. In northeastern India, torrential monsoon rains and rising rivers in Assam claimed 14 more residents, which brought the total flood death toll up to 62. In Syria, a devastating collision between 2 passenger buses on the Deir-ez-Zor-Damascus highway left at least 35 people dead and 30 injured. And in Germany, tragedy struck what was supposed to be a celebratory event when a vehicle drove into a crowd at a Berlin Pride festival, leaving at least 1 person dead and 15 others injured. And in Europe, we are seeing an environmental crisis of a completely unprecedented scale. Massive wildfires raging near Madrid in Spain and Bordeaux in France forced over 250,000 residents and tourists to evacuate. The situation was so extreme that Spain literally had to declare its first ever national wildfire emergency. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people displaced in a matter of hours due to extreme climate events. So we have just reviewed 15 massive events spanning security, trade, domestic politics, and the climate. And remember, this all happened on July 25th, 2026. It really makes you wonder, how will these interconnected threads of conflict, commerce, and climate actually affect our global tomorrow? When ships are stopped, tariffs are raised, leaders resign, and fires rage literally all at once, the fragility of our global stability becomes pretty crystal clear. I encourage you to take this information we've unpacked today and keep looking for those hidden connections. Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today. And as always, keep asking the big questions.